Hello, wise guys. Today we're going to find out once and for all how realistic is The Sopranos. And more importantly, we will find out what in the show is fiction and what real mafia members, aka wise guys, say about The Sopranos. Over the course of the video, we'll be giving The Sopranos Uncle Phillies if the show's facts match reality, and at the same time, we'll be giving the show spataphors if any of the series' facts are made up or greatly exaggerated. By the very final part of the video, we'll sum up the scores and be able to say for sure how authentically The Sopranos mirrors reality. In the past, criminal organizations adhered to a strict set of rules that prohibited the injuring or killing of women and children, drug involvement, and snitching. Unfortunately, those days are long gone, and the landscape of organized crime has drastically changed. Nowadays, different groups collaborate with one another, and unlikely alliances have formed, such as between Russian gangs and Mexican cartels, and even between the Aryan Brotherhood and Cosa Nostra. Additionally, there have been instances where federal agents have worked alongside mafia bosses, such as the notorious case of Whitey Bulger. James Whitey Bulger was a notorious Boston-based organized crime boss who rose to power in the 70s as the leader of the Winter Hill Gang. For many years, Bulger was able to elude the authorities and maintain his criminal empire through the use of violence, intimidation, and corruption. In 1994, Bulger was tipped off by a corrupt FBI agent about a pending indictment, and he went on the run, becoming one of the most wanted fugitives in America. He remained on the lam for 16 years. In 2011, Bulger was finally apprehended in Santa Monica, California, where he was living under an assumed name with his longtime girlfriend. He was subsequently convicted of 11 murders, racketeering, extortion, and other crimes and sentenced to life in prison. The case was notable for the extent to which Bulger was able to bribe and corrupt law enforcement officials, including FBI agents, to protect his criminal enterprise. So, as we can see, Agent Harris's cooperation with Tony Soprano, even though Tony didn't snitch on his men, is portrayed quite plausibly. Now here's an interesting fact from the show. Agent Harris's famous line, "We're gonna win this thing," is not made up by Chase himself, but rather directly borrowed from real-life war on crime.
Damn, we're gonna win this thing.
This passage alludes to the words uttered by ex-FBI supervisor Roy Lindley DeVecchio upon learning about the demise of Lorenzo Larry Lampassi, who was fatally shot outside his Brooklyn residence. DeVecchio faced charges for divulging crucial information to the Colombo family, which resulted in 4 homicides, paralleling Harris's role in furnishing Tony with details that ultimately lead to Leotardo's demise. These real events are well described in one of the books by the famous Joe Pistone, better known to us as Donnie Brasco. I personally recommend his books to read. Well, as we can see, this aspect of the Sopranos series does reflect reality, so we grant the show one Uncle Philly. And if you want to listen to your favorite audiobooks for a whole month for free, find the special link in the description of this video. Mob ties. Ron Zellman is a character in The Sopranos who serves as the New Jersey state senator. He is portrayed as a corrupt politician who has ties to the mafia and frequently engages in illegal activities. Zellman has a close relationship with Tony, and he often uses his political power to help them with their criminal activities. For example, he assists Tony to secure the construction of a controversial project, and helps Tony after Soprano's son is caught bringing a knife into a mental health ward, intending to take revenge on Junior Soprano for shooting his father. I mean, if there is anyone who doubts that some politicians are corrupt, then I have breaking news for you. Here are a few notable cases of politicians who have been involved with the mafia over the years. Bill Bonanno, the son of mafia boss Joseph Bonanno, wrote a book about his experiences in organized crime. In the book, he alleged that his father had close ties to politicians and law enforcement officials in New York. The mafia helped President Kennedy win the election by rigging the vote in key states, such as Illinois and West Virginia. The mafia used their influence over local politicians and election officials to manipulate the vote in Kennedy's favor. Also, Kennedy's father, a notorious bootlegger Joseph Kennedy, had ties to the mafia and used these connections to help his son win the election. JFK promises to stay out of the mafia's business, but after his election, the first thing he does is put his brother Bobby Kennedy in charge of the prosecutor's office. His brother starts to put sticks in the wheels of the mafia, which pisses off the men of honor because this is not the outcome that everyone was expecting. So the mafia bosses figure it's time to get rid of the president, which eventually happens. In other words, in those times, the mafia not only collaborates with politicians, but directly affects the course of world history, although from behind the scenes. Personally, I stick to this particular theory about the JFK assassination. Plus, these events are well depicted in Martin Scorsese's movie The Irishman. Therefore, another Uncle Philly is successfully sent to the Sopranos' piggy bank. If you have other thoughts on this subject, be sure to share them with me in the comments. The fate of mob bosses in real life can vary widely, with some ending up dead or behind bars, while others manage to evade justice or retire peacefully. Similarly, the fate of mob bosses in The Sopranos is not a foregone conclusion and varies throughout the show. Some mob bosses in the show are killed or imprisoned, while others manage to avoid justice and continue operating their criminal enterprises. For example, Tony Soprano is killed in the final episode of the show, while his rival Phil Leotardo is killed in the episode before. Other mob bosses, such as Carmine Lupertazzi, die of natural causes, or to be more precise, at the hands of egg salad. Jackie Aprile and Johnny Sack die of cancer. Dumbest the second retreats, realizing that having a normal life and a family carries more weight for him. A very sacred and propane choice. Silvio Dante, who would potentially become the boss after Tony's demise, is severely injured and will likely spend the rest of his life in a vegetative state. Which reminds me of the fate of the infamous Joseph Colombo. This comparison becomes even more ironic if we remember that in 1970, Colombo created the Italian-American Civil Rights League. And we all remember the episode Christopher, where Silvio fiercely fights for the rights of Italian Americans. Real-life mobsters Anthony Accardo and Bill Tocco had peacefully retired, even though they were still rumored to occasionally offer advice to their replacements' bosses. Sound familiar? Of course, this is about Junior Soprano, who, despite his time off, continues to give Tony valuable advice about his dark deeds. The list could go on for a long time. The point is that The Sopranos shows the real fates of real people, which gives the series additional authenticity. Another Uncle Philly goes to The Sopranos basket. Informants play a significant role in the plot of The Sopranos. As a part of his profession, Tony Soprano is constantly under investigation by law enforcement, and he is always on the lookout for potential informants within his organization. One of the most prominent examples of an informant in the show is Adriana La Serva, the girlfriend of Tony's loyal protege, Christopher. Adriana becomes an informant for the FBI and provides them with information about Tony and his associates. However, her cover is eventually blown, and she's being taken for a ride in the woods by Silvio. Another example is Big Pussy, a member of Tony's crew who is suspected of cooperating with law enforcement. Tony ultimately discovers that he is a rat, and Salvatore has been talking to the fishes like Louis Brazzi ever since. Establishing a cell of informants is a common tactic used by FBI agents to gather intelligence and evidence in criminal investigations. By cultivating a network of informants, agents can gain access to information that they may not be able to obtain through other means, such as surveillance or wiretapping. Moreover, snitches can provide successful infiltration into crime circles for undercover agents, which has been done many times. Take the most famous example of Donnie Brasco. Informants can provide valuable insight into criminal organizations, including their structure, hierarchy, and activities. They can also provide information on specific crimes or individuals, which can be used to build a case against them in court. And what's really striking is the depiction of the transformation of hardened mobsters into snitches in The Sopranos. We see this with Pussy, Ray Curto, Eugene Pontecorvo, Jimmy Altieri, Jimmy Patril. There were plenty of them. There are plenty of such examples in real life as well. Take Henry Hill, for example. Only a few mobsters facing life imprisonment remain true to their principles and refuse to cooperate with justice in exchange for reduced sentences. So, as we see it, it's also true. So we're giving The Sopranos an extra Uncle Philly for authenticity. The involvement of the mafia in the construction business depicted in The Sopranos is based on real-life criminal activities that have been documented in various parts of the United States. The mafia, adept in diverse criminal enterprises, exploit labor unions and the construction sector for significant financial gain. Focusing on New Jersey's local carpenters union in The Sopranos, the mafia control the shop steward, manipulating job assignments and contractual provisions. Within the union contract, a portion of on-the-job workers is reserved for mafia-controlled individuals like Patsy and Eugene, who engaged in a facade of work to collect taxes and health insurance. Concurrently, no-show jobs provide insurance and taxes without requiring physical presence, exemplified by figures like Paulie, who claim a managerial role. Wage negotiations become a key avenue for the mafia's enrichment. As the New Jersey's local carpenters union, acting as an intermediary, negotiate pay rates with the general contractor, the mafia-influenced shop steward inflates rates by a nominal amount per hour. This surplus, while negligible for the contractor, accumulates significantly across the workforce. In this orchestrated scheme, mafia-controlled individuals purportedly earn higher wages than the actual payment to union members, with the surplus diverted into mafia coffers. The cumulative effect across numerous workers, weekly hours, and project durations result in substantial illicit financial gains for the mafia. Whoever thinks this is all in the past, I have some bad news for you. FBI agent Joaquin Garcia, who can rightly be called the successor of the famous Joe Pistone, Donnie Brasco, who at the turn of the century managed to infiltrate the mafia, told in his book about the way things are now. According to Garcia, he was given a construction job at the snap of a finger, where of course he had no need to work. In addition, his new job provided him with a solid health insurance policy that very few in the FBI ranks could afford. Another much-deserved Uncle Philly goes to the Sopranos for realism. The waste management industry has long been a lucrative source of income for the real New Jersey mob. Waste management and garbage disposal play a significant role in the series, showcasing the illegal activities of the Soprano crime family in the waste management industry. But how exactly does the garbage scam operate? The key lies in their control over unions, a formidable leverage point. To ensure the compliance of waste management companies, the mob demands inclusion within the unions. This isn't just a request, it's a demand, backed by the implicit threat that without their presence, your drivers might suddenly find themselves unable to work. Once embedded within the unions, the mob assumes the role of waste management consultants. This not only provides them with a veneer of legitimacy, but also serves as a conduit for their influence over the waste disposal companies. The businesses willingly become pawns in a larger scheme, as the mob, now consultants, wields control over routes, exploiting the lucrative yet undesirable nature of the garbage industry. Mob-controlled garbage companies extend their influence further by coercing businesses into allocating kickbacks for handling their waste. Refusal to comply results in a less than pleasant surprise, a pungent mess delivered to your doorstep, complete with an unmistakable message. The asbestos removal business is another lucrative avenue for the mob. Given its high cost and stringent safety measures, companies willingly pay the mob to handle asbestos disposal, turning a blind eye to the dubious nature of the transaction. In The Sopranos, this becomes a major theme in the Kennedy and Heidi episode. The entire asbestos saga between Phil and Tony unfolded due to a shared construction venture between their respective families. During the construction process, they discovered an abundance of asbestos in the old materials. Faced with the exorbitant costs of proper disposal, they opted for an illicit dumping scheme. Phil insisted on a 25% share of the profits from this illegal disposal operation. To maximize gains, they took shortcuts at every turn, employing inexpensive immigrant labor and dumping the hazardous material wherever possible. In collaboration with a complicit dump site, they struck a deal to overlook the environmental violations. Meanwhile, they billed the town for adhering to all regulations, pocketing the substantial difference for their own gain. Plus, one Uncle Philly goes to the Sopranos. How are the wise guys portrayed? Compared to the Godfather saga, The Sopranos offers a more realistic portrayal of the criminal underworld. Tony Soprano is depicted as a mediator, constantly navigating conflicts among his family members and other criminal organizations. Not everyone in his family likes him, and he must find ways to work with these individuals, which is a reality that is not explored as much in the Godfather movies. James Gandolfini brings to life a character who is a greedy, bigoted bully, yet also self-aware enough to recognize that he got in after the golden age of the mafia had passed. Unlike the characters in The Godfather, Tony and his men are not romanticized figures from opera or Greek tragedy. They are simply ruthless criminals who will harm anyone as long as they get paid. They are savage bullies who constantly exert their power over their subordinates. Tony uses humiliation and physical violence to remind his underlings who is in charge. Lower-level criminals are under constant pressure to earn and pay tribute, which is another aspect of the criminal underworld that is not depicted in The Godfather. It's all true. We're awarding The Sopranos with another Uncle Philly. How do Sopranos make money on card games? A clandestine poker den typically serves as a lucrative source of income for its hosts, funding their endeavors and covering operational costs through the collection of rake and various house fees. Operating without the legal backing of a gaming license, these venues often attract the involvement of organized crime groups, such as the American Mafia, who either host or provide protection for high-stakes underground poker games. In the realm of the Sopranos, let's dissect the mechanics using their example. The buy-in is a substantial $5,000. Notably, Tony's crew generously supplies the room, food, beverages, and cigars at no cost to the players, a tradition upheld even when managed by figures like Johnny and Junior. The revenue for Tony primarily stems from the imposition of a rake, a percentage taken from each pot during poker games that, given the extended playtime and high buy-ins with multiple rebuys, accumulate significantly. Additionally, Tony alludes to his father's practice of charging vig juice to players who borrow money or chips, ensuring that losses extend beyond the initial amount. This borrowing dynamic is exemplified by characters like Scatino, who, when over-leveraged, risk losing control of his businesses. Notably, the executive game, as likened to credit cards by Junior, operates on a ledger system, implying that no direct cash transactions occurred during the game itself. Instead, players settle their accounts at a later date and location. This method offers convenience to high rollers, minimizing the need for cash on the premises and reducing the risk of theft. Tony's expertise, gained notably from robbing LaManna's game, likely contributes to enhanced security measures to safeguard against potential threats and heists. Well, this aspect of the criminal underworld is also very well demonstrated in The Sopranos, so the series gets another well-earned Uncle Philly. Upon closer examination, I discovered that a few aspects of The Sopranos did not live up to reality and had been altered for the sake of making a good show. What did The Sopranos get wrong? One area where the show took significant liberties was in its portrayal of the FBI agents' behavior. In real life, these agents are not nearly as sloppy or ineffective as depicted in the program. For instance, they would undoubtedly have employed GPS trackers on every vehicle owned by anyone under investigation. Anyone who tried to play games with the authorities, as Tony and his team did, would soon find themselves behind the bars. Another area where the show took some liberties was in its depiction of drug trafficking within organized crime syndicates. In reality, drug-related activities play a much more significant role in the operations of modern-day criminal organizations than what was depicted in The Sopranos. Drug trafficking has become a major source of revenue for many criminal groups, and they have become increasingly involved in the production, distribution, and sale of illicit drugs. This has led to increased violence and corruption as these groups fight for control of the lucrative drug trade. In The Sopranos, the bodies of victims are dismembered and buried, which makes for dramatic television. However, in New Jersey, the most efficient way to dispose of a body is by rolling it in a rug, tying it up, and placing it in a dumpster scheduled for pickup. Most commercial garbage collection occurs in the early hours of the morning, and landfills receive thousands of tons of garbage daily. By the time a person is reported missing, their body is typically buried at the bottom of a massive pile of trash. However, on TV shows, disposing of bodies is often more dramatic if the assassin is responsible for locating and digging a shallow grave, like Pussy and Christopher did when they tried to get rid of Emil Kohler's body. In The Sopranos, many of the beatdowns and murders are carried out in public, making them particularly shocking. One of the most memorable instances is in the first season when Tony smashes his car into a man. Another example is what he does to Phil in season 6. Sill's murder in front of the Bing strip club, located on a busy highway in season 6, is another example. The FBI was likely already monitoring the business owned by Sill and Tony, and they knew that Phil was planning to attack the family. While real-life executions do happen in front of the citizens, it is extremely rare. The brazen nature of these violent acts adds to the tension and drama of The Sopranos. The number of killings in The Sopranos is quite high, and even the show's writers acknowledge that they had to increase the body count for entertainment purposes. In reality, the Mafia cannot afford to be constantly killing its own members and rivals in contemporary times for various reasons. While violence is certainly a part of organized crime, the frequency of the killings depicted in the show is not reflective of the current state of the Mafia. The death of Adriana. It seems highly unlikely that the FBI would send a civilian to inform a mobster boyfriend, who they know has been violently abusive towards her in the past, that she is an informant without any protection or surveillance. Such an action would place the informant in extreme danger and go against standard FBI protocol for protecting informants. Typically, the FBI would take extensive measures to ensure the safety of their informants, including providing them with protection and surveillance to minimize the risk of harm. Therefore, it is highly unlikely that the FBI would take such a reckless and dangerous approach in handling an informant. Tony Soprano's good fortune with informants is a recurring theme throughout The Sopranos. Despite being involved in organized crime and constantly under investigation, Tony seems to have an uncanny ability to avoid being caught by the authorities. He manages to identify and eliminate informants within his organization before they can do any significant damage. Would real mob bosses go to shrinks like Tony Soprano? Joe Pistone, a real-life FBI operative who successfully infiltrated organized crime and was embodied by Johnny Depp and Donnie Brasco, got into an exclusive conversation with a popular magazine to analyze The Sopranos. Pistone's criticism? He spares no words when it comes to Tony, the Prozac-addicted patriarch who consults with Dr. Melfi on a regular basis. To begin with, a real mobster would never think of seeing a shrink. It's highly implausible. As promised, we're about to find out what mobsters think of The Sopranos. Following the passing of James Gandolfini, HBO produced a TV special that focused on the actor and his iconic role in The Sopranos. During the program, an FBI spokesman was interviewed to provide insight on the show from the perspective of real-life mobsters. Shockingly, the spokesman revealed that the FBI had wiretaps in both New York and Jersey, and from the very first season, real-life mobsters were discussing the show with each other over the phone. Both the New York and New Jersey factions were concerned about the show's accuracy, to the point where they suspected that informants within their own crews were providing information to the show's screenwriters. The level of accuracy was astonishing, from the way the characters talked and walked to their preferences in food, and even their methods and motives for killing. The hostility between the New York and New Jersey crews depicted in the show was also spot on. Well, as we can see, The Sopranos end up scoring 8 Uncle Phillies and 8 Spatafores. However, that doesn't mean that the series doesn't live up to reality. The way I see it, The Sopranos is the most credible portrayal of the modern mafia in popular culture. One that doesn't romanticize it, showing the flip side of the underworld as it truly is. Which is hardly surprising, since throughout the making of The Sopranos, David Chase regularly consulted with former FBI agents to give the series a solid authenticity. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to VANO VHS and hit the like button. And if you want to show some love to VANO VHS, you can now buy us a coffee. Check out the link on your screens.